Tonight's big stories. Tropical cyclone Kabayan weakens into a low-pressure area, but not before it unleashed torrential rains in some parts of Visayas and Mindanao.
President Bongbong Marcos creates a new office for investments and economic affairs under him and names Robinson's Land's Frederick Go as its head.
And while in Japan, Marcos Jr. said he and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida agreed to quickly conclude talks for joint military drills and training, similar to that of the Balikatan exercises with the United States.
Good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Sean Yao.
Straight on to our top story, and it's to do with the weather. Tropical cyclone Kabayan has weakened into a remnant low-pressure area, but not before it hit Visayas and Mindanao. Heavy rains and winds were experienced in Bislig City, Surigao del Sur, where signal number 1 was in effect earlier today. When the rain stopped, roads had already been flooded or buried in mud. Tree branches fell onto this parking lot in Tandag City in the town of Hinatuan. Relief packs were distributed to affected residents. In Davao Oriental, where Kabayan made landfall earlier this morning, intense rains caused the Lamyawan Bridge to collapse. Classes and government work had been suspended, and authorities are monitoring the Davao River for possible overflow due to floods. The Davao Coast Guard has already canceled boat trips to and from Samal Island.
Some passengers are also stranded in Cebu as trips of all types of vessels have also been suspended. Over 1,000 passengers were left stranded in ports. 700 of them are staying in evacuation centers in Cebu City while waiting for operations to resume.
Mga passengers po, sana nakikiusap po kami na wag na po sila munang pumunta sa mga bilihan ng mga tickets at ipagpaliban na lang po muna natin itong araw na to. Cancel po talaga lahat except those who are going to take shelter lang po.
On to some updates from Pagasa now. The low-pressure area, formerly known as Kabayan, was last spotted in the vicinity of Impasugong, Bukidnon. No wind signals are currently in place, but the shear line coinciding with the passage of this LPA could still bring heavy rainfall over the eastern portion of southern Luzon. The surge of the northeast monsoon or amihan will also be bringing gusty conditions for the next 2 days over most of Luzon and the Visayas.
In other news, President Marcos has ordered the creation of a new agency under him to oversee investments and economic pledges. Through Executive Order 49, he created the Office of the Special Assistant to the President for Investment and Economic Affairs, or OSAPEA. It will be headed by Presidential Advisor on Investment and Economic Affairs Frederick Go, who will hold the rank of Secretary. Go will advise the President on economic matters such as inflation and food security, as well as ensure that investment pledges made are realized. Go will now also chair the economic group with all other agencies including NEDA, DOF, and DTI mandated to regularly report to him. Before he joined government, Go was the president and CEO of Robinson's Land. He was also chair of the Luzon International Premier Airport Development and vice chair of Robinson's Bank. Go holds a management engineering degree from Ateneo de Manila University. He is the nephew of the late John Go Hongwei, who founded the JG Summit Holdings empire.
Now, when it comes to luring foreign investments, do we really need to amend the Constitution? That's one of the debates raging in Congress right now. President Marcos says they're studying possible amendments to the economic provisions to make the country more attractive to foreigners. House party leaders say they're amenable to it, but senators have said now's not the time. On the One News show agenda, one of the framers of the 1987 Constitution, Attorney Christian Monsod, said there are plenty other issues that lawmakers should focus on.
Bakit ito ang kanilang ine-emphasize? Bakit hindi nila mag-enact ng anti-dynasty law na nag-aantay tayo ng 36 years, they have not passed an anti-dynasty law. Kasi sa kanilang benefits yan. Yung feudalistic system of dynastic families. Ang daming batas na pwedeng patuwirin natin na dapat social justice ang ating team at para yung ating growth, yung ating poverty, yung ating inequality. Imbis yan, Ang kanilang gustong ipasok sa Constitution are provisions that benefit them for more power and more opportunities to make money. Mali yan.
Here to weigh in on this debate, we have Senate Minority Leader Koko Pimentel joining us live via Zoom tonight. Good evening, Senator. Thanks for being with us. You might be on mute, Senator.
Wait, yes. Okay. Good evening, Gretchen, Sean, and Regina, and to all of our viewers. Magandang gabi po.
Perfect. Lots to talk about here, but before we get to the Constitution, I wonder if you had any opinions on this latest agency that was created by the President, OSAPIA, Office of the Special Assistant to the President for Investment and Economic Affairs, which from all indications now sits above NEDA and DOF and DTI and even the Budget
ICC.
Department.
It's a good idea, but I don't think it's above the all those agencies. I think he will coordinate with all of those agencies. But it's a good idea that we have one person who's gonna specialize in one task, which is to make sure that the pledges are turned into real brick and mortar investments.
All right, let's get on then to what we really invited you for, which is a charter change without the support of the Senate. You were quoted, I think, in CNN as saying that it is unconstitutional and impossible to do this via People's Initiative. We were just wondering, Senator Pimentel, if you could parse through why a People's Initiative and explain to us why it's unconstitutional.
If the effort to amend the Constitution covers more than one topic, then that is already a revision. Okay. People's Initiative cannot be used for a revision because that would be too complicated to be discussed by the people amongst themselves, di ba? Kasi revision na po to eh. There will be more than one topic, and then of course plus the combination of the different positions per topic. This is a too complex a matter for a People's Initiative. So People's Initiative will be limited to an amendment of the Constitution but not a revision of the Constitution. So from what I have been hearing, they are proposing a revision of the Constitution because it involves more than one amendment. So it's that simple. So if it's a revision, therefore we can use Congress as a constituent assembly, or we can ask Congress to call for a constitutional convention, because these are the two mechanisms for revision. Kasi extensive discussions would be necessary for the revision of the Constitution.
Okay. The President has somehow changed his tune from March when the bill passed the House of Representatives. Mula sa sinasabi niya na this was not a priority, now this will be studied. The economic provisions that are getting in the way of potential investors into the country. Senate President Zubiri has said that we don't need it yet, but he also said that he will need to understand the pulse of the people. Where does the Senate stand on this issue? Is it still the same? Is it still a no, or is there somehow an openness to discussing charter change?
Generally, it's still a resistance to charter change, but from your reports, I think maybe some senators have been softening their resistance to the possibility of amending the Constitution. So I think this is an improved situation now for those who want the Constitution to be amended. But I think it's still, even if you add those who have changed their tenor to those who are open to amending the Constitution, still the number would still be in the minority in the 24-man Senate.
Teka lang, Senator, actually the House and even the President himself hasn't specified which economic provisions they want to change. We
Right.
can make a guess, pero I wonder if you had heard anything about that. What specific changes do they want? Bearing in mind, of course, marami nang napasang laws that would help bring foreign investors in, right? You've got the
Retail
Public
trade,
Service Act, Retail Trade Liberalization Act, Foreign Investment Act. So do you know what exactly they want to amend here?
Actually, that's one of the problems, the lack of specificity, lack of detail. So siguro with this new push for charter change, the proponents should specify. So which ones? And of course, I am guarding this proposal to open up the ownership of land to foreigners because I will have to resist that proposal. We should all be against that because that provision is to favor the Filipinos in their own land. Ngayon, yung opening up of the exploitation of our natural resources to foreign corporations and to foreigners, we should debate that extensively. There may be some advantages, but of course, I do not want to surrender the right to use God's gift to the Filipino people to foreigners. So let us retain also the nationality requirement in the 1987 Constitution that it must be a Filipino or a Filipino-owned corporation.
Right. Senator Koko, you also, under your party's advocacy is actually to push for federalism, which would mean we need to change some political provisions. Political provisions of the Constitution. Are you still making that push, given that ang daming, lumalaban or tutol sa charter change
Yes.
in any form? Kamusta na yun?
Yes, actually, mas marami ang tutol sa amending the political provisions than those who are against amending the economic provisions. Okay, but still, but to be consistent with our stand, the PDP Laban, no, the original PDP Laban or the real PDP Laban, should only be in favor of constitutional amendments if it is about adopting the federal form of government, because that is actually the main objective of the party.
Senator Padilla also talked about extending term limits for our senators, for congressmen. Your thoughts on that?
Extending ba? I don't know. I think that is not accurate. So I think Senator Padilla wanted the change in the terms of the president. Instead of 1 6-year term, he wants a maximum of 2 4-year terms, so that there will be a re-election, and then a vote for the president should be a vote for the vice president. So these are two good ideas, but still that is not federalism. So we can accommodate these two ideas, but we have to pursue federalism.
Okay. Yung isa pong naipasa natin no March 2022, yung Public Services Act, that was supposed to be a cure somehow to the weaknesses in our Constitution, removing 40% restriction in foreign ownership in railways, airports, airlines, seaports, and telcos. Ayun nga lang, medyo na-hold yata ang pag-implement nitong law na to because it is facing two separate Supreme Court petitions challenging its constitutionality. Are you discussing that law, somehow amending it to be able to ease and help foreign investors to come in? Where are we on that?
I think that is already the best effort of Congress to relax some of the so-called strict rules in the Constitution by distinguishing between public service and public utility. And I think that is the one being questioned in the Supreme Court. So we should not touch that law because that's already the best effort. The next best effort is actually to amend the Constitution and to include the definition of the phrases public service and public utility.
Right,
But then
Senator.
that's an economic provision, so we tried to do it by law. Ang binabantayan po talaga natin would be land ownership as well as the exploitation of our natural resources. Yung mga practice of profession, mas open pa po ako doon eh. Yung practice of profession, yeah, maybe it's time to subject Filipino professionals to competition by their foreign peers. So I believe this can be beneficial. There might even be transfer of technology or some kind of transfer of methods which can be beneficial to our country.
Can I just get one thing crystal clear, Senator? Are you against amending the economic provisions of the Constitution, or are you against the House suggesting that they could exclude the Senate in the cha-cha process?
I am for amending the political provisions because of federalism. Okay. Okay. So if the effort is just to amend the economic provisions, I will not be excited about that. And then if the effort is to open up land ownership to foreigners, I will be very much against that. So, but if the proposal is about the procedure and they are trying to disregard the participation of the Senate, I'm not only against that, but I'm telling them that is wrong and that will not prosper. When that is questioned before the Supreme Court, that effort will fail.
All right, Senator, to add to what Regina said, you have been quoted by newspapers as saying that okay na naman yung batas natin when it comes to letting in foreign investments and foreign investors. You actually said, and this is actually very much akin to what investment bankers and other investors are already saying, that it's the other things that are actually serving as a hindrance to letting in foreign investors. Of course, mahal yung kuryente, etc., red tape, ganyan. Do you still see that at this point in time? And also, what other bills are pending in Senate to maybe address some of these other concerns na hindi naman related no, sa cha-cha?
Well, as far as bills are concerned, maybe I cannot think of pending bills. Because yung fight against corruption, ano na yan, the laws are already in place. It's a matter of really, it's a change of the heart, it's a change in the attitude of the people. Yung kuryente yan, maybe a bill can be filed, but no one has so far found the sweet spot or the formula on how we can entice investments in our energy sector and at the same time not to spoil them too much, no, and make the rates reasonable for our consumers. So yan po ating mga problema, and of course our peace and order and the value of our currency. Yan. Sometimes hindi na po law ang solution. It's really now the attitude of the people, the seriousness of the people, especially the leaders as well as those in position in government.
Sorry, Senator. I wonder if you also are aware of where this push from the lower house is coming from in terms of why they feel like they need to start talking about charter change at this point. May narinig po ba kayo?
Well, ang narinig ko lang ganito, it's nagbubuhat din ng bangko ang House actually. Ang sabi, may nakausap kasi yung congressman, sabi nila, natapos na nila lahat ng priority bills ng presidente. So, they have time. So, with the time on their hands, they are now exploring charter change. So that's what one congressman told me. So nagmayabang siya ng konti, natapos na daw lahat ng priorities. So,
Speaking of, Senator, pipirmahan ba talaga yung budget sa Wednesday? Maasahan ba natin yun? Magyayari
meron akong invitation, nag-regrets lang ako, pero meron ako natanggap na invitation sa December 20 ang event. Yeah.
Okay, so we look forward to covering that as well. We're gonna have to leave that there for now. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was Senate Minority Leader Senator Koko Pimentel.
Up next, President Marcos wraps up his Japan trip with some 14.5 billion pesos in investments pledges in tow. We'll break down when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News. back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
It's been a busy couple of days for President Marcos, who's now on his way back home from Japan. He was there for the ASEAN-Japan Commemorative Summit and had a bilateral meeting on the side with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. The Presidential Communications Office said Marcos managed to secure 14.5 billion pesos in investment pledges from 9 MOUs. These cover different sectors, including semiconductor, healthcare, infrastructure, agriculture, and maritime security. The president said some of these are extensions of already existing contracts, but together with the deals signed on his last visit in February, the president said these are expected to generate some 40,000 jobs.
I'm happy to be able to say, maganda naman ang takbo. At kung ano yung mga kanilang pinaplano, the Japanese generally are very efficient, so they are able to really stay within schedule in terms of their expenditures, in terms of their investment, in terms of their infrastructure development. We have entered into agreements that concern other areas. One of them, of course, is security, as Japan has the same concerns in China, in the China Sea. We are in South China Sea. Sila naman nasa North China Sea, and so we have some very similar issues, and the assistance that they are providing us, the partnership that they are providing us, will have a synergy to increase our capabilities.
We are also talking about power supply and the shift to clean energy in line with discussions at the COP28 summit. Well, President Marcos also made it a point to invite business leaders to invest in the Philippines' renewable energy industry during the Asia Zero Emission Community, or the AZEC Leaders Meeting. And of course,
The elephant in the room, sabihin mo na.
discussions on the West Philippine Sea did not escape the summit. The big one was the bilateral talk with Prime Minister Kishida, where they talked about the Reciprocal Access Agreement. Yes, the RAA. Secretary Gibo Chodoro explains this is similar to the Visiting Forces Agreement with the United States. Sabi nga doon tungkol sa RAA, I think both the Prime Minister and the President agree as soon as possible. Lahat ito as soon as possible. Yesterday, if not sooner, that is what the President said.
When he was asked about when RAA is gonna come to fruition.
Pero na-notice ko, no, kung sinabi ni Secretary Gibo na pareho siya sa VFA, na-ginunk na natin. We're now in EDCA, di ba? Or at least we have a mutual defense treaty and we have an enhanced defense cooperation agreement. So I'm not sure kung baka nag-slip of the tongue lang siya and he said VFA because we don't have that anymore. But in any case, when...
But it's similar to the Balikatan exercises.
Right.
under
Pero iba
VFA,
kasi yung
yeah.
Visiting Forces Agreement. That involves them having permanent bases here in the Philippines, right? Now, on whether China's tactics in the South China Sea was a big factor in this RAA, ang sabi naman ni President Marcos dyan, it's been in the works way before that. Of course, the incidents in the past couple of months have certainly sharpened their focus when it comes to that. But again, that is one of the things that I'm looking forward to that will have a very big multiplier effect on our capabilities.
Of course, hindi lang ang Pilipinas ang may deal with Japan. There's also Indonesia. There's also Malaysia strengthening maritime security and safety.
It's a whole host of ASEAN countries
Yes.
that came to this summit in Tokyo. And of course, they each have they've worked out different kinds of
But the
agreements with
RAA that
Japan.
we have with Japan allows our forces to have joint exercises here
Similar to Balikatan.
and there.
They could
in
also go
Japan.
there to Japan. That's right.
For humanitarian
For joint military training. They didn't skirt around the wording
Disaster
this time.
response.
This time around, joint to enhance the Coast Guard's capabilities. They were very specific about that. So,
Tsaka paano daw papasok, di ba, sa teritoryo ng isa't isa if it comes to
That's
that.
true,
So a
that's
bit
true.
of stronger word here. Now, in Japan, President Marcos was also asked whether there are plans to expel Chinese Ambassador Huang Xilian. This is, of course, still connected to the December 10 water cannoning incident over at the Ayungin Shoal. Let me bring in Menlos Baños for the answer. Mean, may expel ba or mare-replace si Ambassador Huang Xilian?
Yes, good evening, Sean. The straight answer is no. President Marcos has no plans of asking the Chinese government to recall Ambassador Huang Xilian. He was asked about this right before capping off his Japan trip and heading back to the Philippines. The president clarified that while he is personally dismayed over the recent incidents in the West Philippine Sea, he understands that the ambassador is simply relaying China's position on the matter.
Well, he's the ambassador of China, so he will always state the Chinese position. Again, kung siguro akong personally ang pinag-usapan, maybe I'll be upset. But you're not talking about me, we're talking about the Philippines. So it doesn't serve any purpose for us to lose our temper or to overreact. I think Ambassador Wang is just doing his job. He's continuing to state the Chinese narrative. Of course, we don't agree with that narrative. But I cannot see him doing anything else. And so we just keep trying.
President Marcos also sees the need to act and respond cautiously in order to prevent maritime tensions from escalating.
We are exerting all efforts, no, but we have to be very careful that we do not overreact, that we do not make mistakes that might be misinterpreted by anyone. Kailangan talaga maingat tayo dahil pag may nangyari ulit dyan, if we heighten the tensions, it won't lead us to a good result. So we are being very circumspect in the actions that we will take.
For now, Sean, President Marcos insists that ramping up alliances in the region is our best bet at this point. The chief executive admits that even if we reach the desired level of spending on the defense sector, it still wouldn't be enough to match China's military force. Sean?
Thank you for that update, Manlis Baños.
Here to talk about the president's Japan trip and ongoing maritime tensions, we have with us in the studio geopolitical analyst Don McLean-Gill. Don is also a lecturer at the International Studies Department of De La Salle University. Good to have you in studio, Don. Thanks for coming all this way.
It's a true pleasure to join outstanding journalists such as yourself.
I would not call us that, but okay, thank you.
Thank you, nonetheless. It is Christmas.
That's true. Straight off, reactions to the Japan trip by President Marcos, specifically the bit where he agreed with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to ramp up the talks over the RAA, Reciprocal Access Agreement, which means pretty soon we might see Japanese and Philippine troops, doing joint drills.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is, in fact, one of the most important aspects of our reinvigorated relationship with Japan, particularly because our leaders, are quite convergent in their interests to secure not only their partnership, but to contribute positively towards the region's security and the establishment of the rules-based order. So this is, of course, one of the most important aspects of that partnership where security plays a huge role, and this is also a new step in Japanese foreign policy, particularly with the latest national security strategy that highlighted the importance of security as a pillar to their foreign policy.
And how will China perceive this? You have said that the U.S. and Philippine military alliance will be seen as provocative by China. Will the same be said of the U.S. and of the Japan and Philippine RAA?
Well, if we look into the situation of the West Philippine Sea and the greater South China Sea, we have to understand that any addition or subtraction of variables will definitely have an impact on China's perception towards that. And of course, China ironically supports a multilateral Asia, but a multilateral Asia which it seeks to dominate. And that's not what multipolarity, a multipolar Asia where China seeks to dominate Asia. And that's not really what multipolarity stands for. And of course, any form of action that is taken within this area, within China's burgeoning sphere of influence, to the point which would challenge its narrowly driven ambitions, is something that would not be sitting nicely for China and, of course, the Chinese people, given that they rely on nationalism, of course.
We have this deal with Japan. We also have our treaty with the United States. They have proclaimed that they will defend the Philippines according to those agreements. But how do you expect this to materialize on ground? Because they have those proclamations, but we still see the situation escalating in the West Philippine Sea. The joint patrols remain to be exercises.
Right.
They haven't really been there to actually defend our frontliners from the Chinese Navy and the Coast Guard.
Right, and that's an excellent question, Gretchen. We have to understand that these initiatives all have different purposes, different roles, and which eventually supposed to, from our perspective, of course, these are joint collaborations, meaning they shouldn't only benefit us, but they should also benefit the parties that we are collaborating with. So in terms of the Philippine interest, we talk about the joint exercises, joint patrols. The main purpose of joint patrols is to ensure that we are present, that we are constantly steadfast in our pursuance of our sovereignty and sovereign rights, including our EEZ. And this, of course, shows where countries are largely interested in working with us to promote our interests, shows that there's always that convergence of countries, not only traditional but non-traditional as well. You look at India, look at Canada, you look at the EU, all working towards recognizing the Philippines' interest in this as well. But of course, when you talk about defense, it's only with the United States that we have that clause where an attack on our vessels would trigger that particular article of the MDT. We do not have a sort of MDT with Australia or Japan. What we have is we have a status of VFA with Australia, which is in fact a revamped VFA from what we've had with the US. And of course, we have so far working towards an RAA with Japan and similar other agreements with other countries as well. So they have different purposes, but of course, the main point here would be to allow us to more effectively pursue our interests. Of course, there would be challenges. It's not a walk in the park.
How do you think Beijing might perceive closer military ties between Japan and the Philippines?
Well, China really does not want its neighbors to be engaged in security cooperation with countries that are out of the South China Sea region, of course, Southeast Asia. It looks at it provocatively, as we've mentioned time and again, because, of course, the need to understand what really is Beijing after? Beijing is after solidifying its sphere of influence, altering the status quo to its favor, and of course shifting the balance of power. So of course, when you have countries that are willing to build on the capacity of its competitors, then it's not going to be something that it would like, of course. But now is a do-or-die situation for the Philippines under President Marcos Jr. Our foreign policy is headed towards the right direction, but of course, it wouldn't be easy. And this is where we would be tested. China is testing us every single day in the West Philippine Sea. And this is where we would have to show our consistency and our political will.
Right. To add to that and what you said earlier, so China sort of wants to be the hegemon, at least in this side of the world, opposed to like a real or true multilateral kind of dealing or relationship with its neighbors, right? And we always say this here. Last week I was telling Regina, I don't want to talk about the West Philippine Sea anymore because we just keep going around. They keep cannoning us, and then people will, other embassies will release statements, and they all sound the same.
Yeah.
After a while, right? And so what would break this, really? What would break this chain of, we'll send a note verbal, and we'll send a diplomatic protest, and then we'll do it again every single day that incidents happen in the West Philippine Sea? Like, what is, the trigger that would make everything change, or that we can expect a different reaction?
Yeah, I get your frustration totally. And I completely understand what you're talking about. And of course, being an observer of West Philippine Sea, Western Pacific geopolitics, you get to see that we're sort of in a loop, in this particular aspect. But there are changes, of course. We have to understand that China has the upper hand in militarizing the entire South China Sea. If you look into the map, the South China Sea, the greater South China Sea, serves as a shield that allows China to prevent Western militaries, for the US, for example, to enhance its military footprints in the region. So securing the area, militarizing it to its favor is an absolute priority for China. But what we can see now is that China is now realizing that we are not alone in this, and that is in fact a major signal that we are showing right now. Because for the past few years, China is well aware of the inconsistencies in our policies. We have been quite inconsistent with our policy for the past few years, and this has allowed China to exploit that to its favor. But now we are showing that, of course, it's not going to be so simple as just, manipulating the narrative. We have been quite proactive in illustrating China's false narrative, its desire for disinformation campaigns, which it spends billions of dollars in. So, of course, this is not going to be very simple for us either, given that even our partnering countries like the EU, for example, Canada, they're also wary of engaging deeper, because their interests lie largely on keeping the South China Sea's freedom of navigation open, the sea lines of communication open, and they have to work with resident countries such as the Philippines. Now, our point here is that we must maximize this to our advantage as well, and we must continue to work with these partners, particularly to build our own capacity, not only in the military sphere, but hopefully economically as well, to decouple slowly from our imports in China.
All right, Don, just to add to that, how much of this is really related or has to do with Taiwan? Last week, in an interview with Nikkei, Philippine ambassador to the United States, Babe Romualdez, was quoted as saying that, I'm going to read it, the South China Sea is the flashpoint and not Taiwan, and that the skirmishes between Philippine and Chinese vessels in the South China Sea could spark a major conflict at any time. So do you agree that these two issues are separate and that the real flashpoint is the South China Sea and, in fact, not Taiwan?
Well, if you look into it as a whole, the entire Western Pacific is of absolute importance to China in its quest for dominance. And of course, Taiwan is considered to be an area which China has effectively staked its claim, and despite the fact that it has been engaging in a very unruly behavior. But of course, given the situation, given international politics in the 21st century, where every aspect is interconnected with one another, it is quite difficult to segregate Taiwan as a separate issue and the West Philippine Sea as a separate issue, given, of course, the interlinked security dilemmas that we are all facing. But of course, but we have to understand this. I understand that there are a lot of aspects to this where we try to assume the worst case scenario. But given China's position, it is in a position that wants to avoid war, because war would be self-defeating for China as well. Its military has not engaged in any war-like situation for how many decades? The last time they did that, they lost, and in the 1970s. So we have to understand that war is not something that China wants to achieve. If we have time, just a quick analogy. What does a bully do? Right? The bully wants to provoke the situation, make its victim weaker and weaker through provocations, until to the point where the victim would just accept it. That, okay, whatever, I'm going to give you my lunch, I'm going to give you my money, etc. Just don't hurt me. And the bully does that often behind the teacher's backs. Right? So in our situation now, China does not want to engage in a direct confrontation, a shooting war. It has been doing so since the 1990s, since 2008. It has been altering the status quo of the East China Sea, the South China Sea, without the overt use of military force. And this is something that we have to take into consideration, because while the military aspect is good for the long term, mid to long term, we have to improve our capabilities for the gray zone tactics.
The Philippines, the president spoke about finding new solutions to this. And Vietnam is a curious case for me because they're approaching this differently. Trying to find a balance between the relationship with China and the United States, achieving equilibrium. What do you think works for them that we can employ in our situation, given, as you said, China does not want to go to war? So there are concerns on our end, economic concerns. They are our #1 trade partner.
Right.
What do you think can work for us,
Right.
Given what Vietnam is doing and what's working for them?
Excellent. And Vietnam is definitely a unique case in Southeast Asia. Well, given, of course, that I always say that Southeast Asia is a basket of mixed vegetables. You can cook them differently, etc., but they all look good in a salad. So it's a mixed region with diverse interests, history, backgrounds, etc., perspectives. Vietnam's case represents, its hedging strategy, between the U.S. and China in the 21st century, similar to how it tried to hedge between the Soviet Union and China during the Cold War. Represents a desire to balance its domestic political perception, okay, along with its agreement towards multi-pronged or rather multi-alignment. So it's trying to engage as much as it can without putting its eggs in one basket, without falling into one block. The Philippines, however, we are currently trying to make that position that we are not for block politics. No, we have made this position very clear. We are not engaging with our partners for the purpose of block politics, but in defense. We are mainly utilizing this to secure our sovereignty and sovereign rights. And quick to your question, what can we do in terms of the economy? Well, our imports from China is the most problematic aspect of our asymmetric relationship. One of my suggestions is that we can't just reroute our imports from China because that will be more expensive produce, increase inflation, etc. What we can do is we should harness our manufacturing capabilities. The partners that we have, joint production here in the Philippines, we have the labor, we may need the technology in order to mitigate the prices of the outputs or the products that we are largely importing from China. Do it at the top 100 products. If we are able to lessen our dependence on those products and improve our capacity, then that could be a way forward.
That's a bit of a long-term solution, though, Don.
It is a long-term
And also,
solution.
just to point out what you were saying about bloc politics earlier, this administration has pivoted us back to the U.S., leaning very heavily on the U.S. in terms of international relations, right? And the other thing I wanted to point out there is the U.S. itself is coming up to a crucial election year next year, which again could change the equation for everyone, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the main thing. When we engage with that in mind, this is why we have to engage largely based on our interests, given, of course, the reality that the only thing constant in international politics is change. And there's nothing more that can be sort of assumed in order to preserve that status quo. So we should always prepare. And though we are now aligning closely with the U.S., it does not mean that we are willing to let go of key areas of our interests that may not be in line with U.S. interests as well. And I coined that term of proactive autonomy, which means that we are putting our alliance with the U.S. at the forefront, but at the same time, we seek that level of political autonomy as well, to engage beyond the sphere of the alliance as well, and that's what we're trying to do.
Here's hoping the rest of the countries hear the message loud and clear. Thank you so much for joining us.
Mag-order ng online.
Thanks so much for joining us, geopolitical analyst Don McLean-Gill.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
The big story will return after this quick break. Keep it here on One News.
Welcome back. You're still watching Big Story here on One News.
Veteran film and TV actor Ronaldo Valdez passed away on Sunday. He was 76 years old. Valdez, whose real name is James Ronald Gibbs, has been in the showbiz industry for 6 decades. His last project was ABS-CBN's Too Good to Be True. His list of films include May Minamahal, The Mistress, and 7 Sundays. Tributes continue to pour in for the veteran actor. In her Instagram account, Catherine Bernardo shared photos and videos of Lolo Sir. That is the character portrayed by Valdez in the TV hit Too Good to Be True. TV5's Good Morning Kapatid host Dimples Romana also remembered the actor. Dimples described Valdez as full of joy, life, and gratitude, and thanked Valdez for all the learnings and lessons. Valdez's talent manager, Jamela Santos, also posted a lengthy message on her Instagram page saying the loss of the veteran actor is too much to bear. Santos thanked Valdez for the love and care that he gave her. Valdez leaves behind wife Maria Fe, daughter Melissa, and son, One News talk show host Jano Gibbs. The Quezon City Police District has said that it is investigating the death of Valdez, assuring the public that any findings will be officially released. Our heartfelt condolences go to the family of Ronaldo Valdez.
And after his traumatic experience being held hostage by Hamas, Filipino caregiver Jimmy Pacheco is now back in the Philippines. However, Pacheco does not plan to stay long and is set on returning to his job in Israel by February of next year. Rainiel Pawid with the report.
A tight hug from his wife, 3 children, and mother greeted Jillianor Jimmy Pacheco upon his arrival in the country. Pacheco was one of the 2 Filipinos who were hostage by Hamas last October 7th. He was held for 49 days. Up to now, Pacheco still can't believe he's free and has been reunited with family.
Masaya po ako na nandito na ako sa Pilipinas. Nakita ko na yung mga anak ko, pamilya ko, asawa ko. Saka parang panaginip lang to. Plano ko po, babalik pa po. Kahit mga ilang taon lang po. Masecure ko lang yung pag-aaral ng mga bata.
The Philippine government is ready to support Jimmy in his children's education. Livelihood is also underway.
We will mobilize further our resources in terms of pangkabuhayan. Itong isang pinoint out ni Pangulo nung nagpulong kami. Yung pangmatagalang tulong, pangkabuhayan at empleyo.
May proseso ang scholarships ng mga bata. Specifically, minention ni Clarice na gusto niya magkaroon ng negosyo. Nag-agree naman si Jimmy na ang gusto niyo pwesto sa palengke.
While in the Philippines, Pacheco will also undergo treatment for his left ear, now considerably deaf by gunshots during his captivity. Aside for a lifetime monthly pension and stipends, the Israeli government will shoulder all of Jimmy's medical expenses.
And as a victim of terror, he is entitled of getting all the support like any other Israeli who is a victim of terror. And talking to Jimmy, I know that he already got also psychological support and assistance in Israel, and the Israeli government has been with him since the moment he was out of Gaza.
Pacheco's loved ones are still shaken by it all, but the OFW's wife and mother said they will support Jimmy if he wants to return to Israel. Despite his harrowing experience, Jimmy plans to return to Israel as a caregiver by February.
Actually, may trauma na rin ako, pero kailangan po para po may secure niya yung kinabukasan po ng mga bata.
Masaya na po. Magkakasama na kami lahat.
After finally being reunited with his family, Jimmy is set to return home to their province in Santa Ana, Cagayan on Tuesday. For News 5, Rainiel Pawid, we are One News.
And before we go, exactly 1 week to Christmas, and if you are still looking for a place where you can really feel the holiday spirit, well, why not head on over to Malacanang, where a Christmas fair has been opened for the public. We have Julie Baiza joining us from the palace to show us the merry happenings over there. Julie, kamusta ang peryahan dyan sa Malacanang?
Sean, that's right. The holiday spirit is very much alive here in Malacanang. In this Christmas fair, pwedeng-pwede ang mga bata at mga may pusong bata. pwedeng mag-food trip at libre pang rides gaya nitong Zoo Go Round. The Kalayaan grounds here at the palace is open for visitors from 7 to 11 in the evening. They may enter gates 6 and 7 to access the fair. Inside, there are many rides to choose from like the Space Rocket, Zoo Go Round, and Go-Kart. The Zoo Go Round in particular is a favorite of young visitors and even those young at heart. Earlier, we spotted the college students from La Consolacion enjoying this ride. They said they visited the fair to distress. Another visitor, Miss Rosel, brought her niece saying this is her chance not only to enter Malacanang but also to bond and enjoy. Aside from the fair, there's also a Misa de Gallo being held here in the palace from 4:30 to 5:30 in the morning. Sean, the Palace Carnival of Rides will be open to public until December 23. Just a reminder to bring umbrella and don't bring unnecessary items like inflamables and sharp objects. Back to you, Sean.
Thank you so much for that, Julie Baiza.
Ilang concerts, meron ng peryahan.
May Misa de Gallo
I
pa.
was like, I'm inviting people to Malacanang.
I don't know. I was reading it. I'm like, is this a typo?
I don't think the president will appreciate it, but you know pala, it's open to the public.
It's open to the public. But I have so many questions. Like, can you wear jeans? Because normally you can't.
Of course.
And then can you...
What can you bring in? Because of security concerns, right?
Well, not
What are you allowed to bring
flammables
in?
and not any pointed objects. So parang siguro ano lang, parang undas. Yung mga well, anyway, that's something to check out. I haven't been to Malacanang since my field trip.
Bucket list yun, ano? Para sa mga
diba?
bata to take a
Various
photo, to take a family
Malacanang.
portrait.
And it
in
also looked
Malacanang.
kind of nice, really.
Sana safe lang yung mga rides.
That's
Hindi
true.
kasi minasakyan ako ng ganun
That's
dati,
true.
medyo nakakatakot. So,
Actually, nagchubibo ako sa perya before. Tapos parang medyo na bumilis yung ikot niya. Sabi ko, no.
Mukha namang bago
namang
yung
safe,
ano,
tsaka maganda yung
rides.
rides. Quality.
And if it isn't, you just walk over and complain to the chief executive.
President Bongbong. All right, that's it for the show on this Monday night.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night.